Hello, it's Darren Wood. The Last Jedi is finally out and it is causing a frenzy. So today I'm going to talk about how I interpreted The Last Jedi, and I'm sure 50% of you will disagree with me since it seems like that's how public opinion is currently split, but here we go. Star Wars has captured our hearts and minds for over 40 years now, and with the release of The Last Jedi, our beloved franchise has made a significant shift into new territory. We have officially left behind the comforting space of George Lucas's original plot. We are moving forward with new characters and a new story arc. We are no longer encased in the rise and fall of the Galactic Empire. Star Wars is moving on, and some fans are freaking out, which is understandable. It's impossible not to be affected by something you love changing. There have been a lot of mixed reviews about The Last Jedi, as is the case with any new movie in an established franchise, but this is Star Wars, man. This is like 40 years, fans that grew up with it, like the most intense fandom out there. But although a lot of people can agree that objectively it's a good movie, what's giving a lot of hardcore fans some pause is how different this film feels from any other Star Wars film. And while some fans are embracing the new change, others are having a hard time watching their baby grow up and move on. But I think we need to remember that we will always have the original trilogy. And just because something changes doesn't mean it changes what came before it and what it means to you. Just do what I do when studios ruin the things I love. Just pretend like they never happened and they don't exist. But if you watched my last video, then you know that I was hoping for something new with this movie, so as you can probably guess, I love this movie. I love that Rian Johnson didn't get all wrapped up in fan service and that he dared to take risks to make a completely unique Star Wars movie. I am all for it. Unfortunately, I think some people were also disappointed because they were expecting an Empire Strikes Back and got more of a Return of the Jedi. Although I will say that the focus on inner conflict felt very Empire Strikes Back to me. But here's the thing, I feel like The Force Awakens was kind of a tough start for the new trilogy because at the end of it they were left with all these underdeveloped characters and a story that felt like it was going in the same direction as the original trilogy. And I mean, in reality, there really was no effective setup because J.J. Abrams wasn't planning on coming back for Episode 8, and Rian Johnson said that when he pitched The Last Jedi, Lucasfilm had no plan for the trilogy, so he was free to do whatever he wanted. Like, The Force Awakens was made with no future consideration, so Episode 8 was left with the burden of fleshing out its characters and figuring out where to go from its redundant plot. So I feel like the reason why The Last Jedi feels more like Return of the Jedi is because Rian Johnson was like shedding the drag of The Force Awakens and trying to send the franchise off in a new direction. But for all its redundancy, The Force Awakens definitely has better pacing than The Last Jedi. My brother said he felt like The Last Jedi's use of multiple characters and simultaneous storylines was better suited for a TV show than for a movie. He was like, if you're going to show several different characters dealing with different conflicts that are all trying to tell that war is inevitable, it's better to do that in a TV format where you can spend time on each part without affecting the other part, like Game of Thrones. And I feel that having all those different moving parts kind of felt unfocused and unconnected. The pacing of The Last Jedi was definitely a little wonky, and I think that's because all these things were happening at once, but they weren't moving forward at the same pace. Like, they kept cutting in between all these sequences that were progressing at different speeds, so it felt like you kept stopping and starting and stopping and starting. But I feel like they needed to do all that shit in order to develop the characters and the story to a point where they could send it off in a new direction, because I really, really loved each individual story, although I can't admit that as one piece they did kind of take away from each other. And from here on out I'm going to be dropping some major spoilers, so if you need to jump ship, do so now. There were 4 different wonderful stories. You had Luke, Rey, and Kylo going into the Force and the fallacy of the Jedi Order. There was Admiral Holdo and Poe dealing with leadership dynamics and the consequences of heroics. There was Finn and Rose dealing with choices and the realities of war. And then there was Kylo and Rey and their battles with the past. And then I feel like all those stories tied into the overreaching plot, which was that there is value in failure and that there will always be hope. I was so pumped for them to finally get into the fallacy of the Jedi Order. I've wanted to see that for a really long time, and if you want to see me get into that, check out my last video. I'll put the link below. But I was also really pleased to see them get back into the mysticism of the Force. I know they go into that a lot in the animated series, but I feel like we haven't explored that in a movie since The Empire Strikes Back. Like, it just turned into more of a superpower than mystical life force that binds us all, which was what George Lucas originally intended it to be. Christian Taylor, who is the head writer of the Clone Wars, the animated series, said that George Lucas explained the Force to the writers of the show in this like incredibly articulated, well thought out monologue, and that he explained that there's a rhyme and reason to the Force that's akin to the spirituality of Buddhism and the true teachings of Christianity. So I loved when Luke was like, the Force exists within us and all around us. It connects all living things. It was arrogant and selfish of the Jedi to think it belonged to them, because it fucking doesn't. And I was like, damn, that's deep. And then I loved how he talked about how dangerous it is to idolize people, and how that idolatry leads to hubris, and that hubris leads to arrogant negligence. And when he said that the Jedi's hubris allowed Darth Sidious to rise right underneath their noses, I was just like, thank you. And then even Snoke said that bit about how darkness rises and then light to meet it. I'm just so happy that they finally put in a movie that imbalance in the Force goes both ways. One thing that felt significantly different from all the other Star Wars films was Luke's character change. And I realize it's a bummer to see the ultimate Jedi that we all idolize as children grow disillusioned by the very thing that once defined him, but it was the most logical and effective step for his character. Rian Johnson said that when he was building the character stories for The Last Jedi, he was thinking in terms of where they came from in the last movie, and he was like, if Luke had exiled himself while all of his friends were still fighting the good fight, there had to be a compelling reason. And not only that, this is the story that George Lucas has been trying to tell about the Jedi and the balance of the Force all along. So it makes sense that The Last Jedi would have to face the reality of it all. And I liked how Luke exiling himself was kind of like an homage to good old Master Yoda. I liked how his years of island isolation also turned him into like a kooky little hermit, you know, just like being sassy and tossing lightsabers and gratuitously drinking milk from the nipples of fat sea creatures. But I just have to add, my heart like leapt out of my chest and jumped on a shooting star when I saw kooky old puppet Yoda. That scene was fucking phenomenal. I loved the whole exchange. Like, I laughed when he was like, oh, page turners, they were not. And I loved when he said that line, we are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters. I was just like, classic Yoda wisdom. It was so great to see him. I know there's also been some back and forth about the expansion of Force capabilities. Personally, I'm all for it. I think if they want to say that's what the Force can do, then fuck it, that's what the Force can do. I don't think it needs to be tied to something that was started decades ago. We're moving into new territory here. Of course we should explore and expand the lore of the franchise. However, I still think it should be like within reason of the universe. Like, for instance, I didn't like that Kylo had water on his hand after Force connecting with Rey. I felt like that was like a little too far. I was like, okay, you know, let's not transfer matter through the Force, you know, that's pushing it, you know. If he saw water on his hand, but like it wasn't actually there, I mean, that's cool because it just shows how strong their connection is, but like actual teleportation of matter across the galaxy, like, that's a little much. And then, of course, Leia soaring through the wreckage. Like, don't get me wrong, I was super excited to see Leia using the Force. You know, I've always wanted to see that. She's Anakin Skywalker's daughter, you know, of course she's strong with the Force. Luke even says so in Return of the Jedi. But I wish they would have done it in a way that wasn't so weird. Like if she just gotten blasted into the side, or, you know, buried under shit or stuck onto something, and then she just like used the Force to move something or blast a door open. I feel like that would have had the same effect without her like flying through the sky. It was just cheesy. I really, really love the Admiral Holdo and Poe story arc. She was definitely one of my favorite characters because I'm a total Ravenclaw and I love that shit. But it was so refreshing to see the leader-hero dynamic where the hero was wrong, because we always follow the hero, the Gryffindor, because acts of heroism are more exciting and emotional than the careful strategizing of a tactician. It's always like the plucky hero going off doing these impulsive acts of valor, you know, despite what anyone else says, because it's the right thing to do, and if they won't, who will? And then they end up saving the day and everyone has to be like, oh my god, you were right all along, thank you so much, you saved us all. But it's like, I'm sick of that shit. People in leadership positions are usually in leadership positions because they know what the fuck they're doing. Like, being responsible for a huge group of people is a heavy burden, and I just love how they showed the complexities of that hero-leader dynamic. Poe had such a full and satisfying character arc. He starts out the film with this cocky hotshot attitude. He disobeys orders. He makes rash decisions that cost the Resistance several lives and ships. And he's all like, I did what I had to do for the mission. And Leia's like, look around, there's more at stake than the mission. But he thinks action is the best reaction in a fight, so he gets all butthurt when he gets demoted and he can't do anything. And then Admiral Holdo takes over command, and then because he still can't see the bigger picture, he gets all pissed at her because she takes a seemingly passive approach and won't explain to him why. But it's like, she's an admiral for a reason. She can't be explaining every detail of her plan, because in a situation this dire and volatile, she needs to be able to change course at a moment's notice without involving the opinions of the whole crew. And she also needs to keep information on a need-to-know basis, and at that moment in time, he had been demoted. Then when Leia explains Holdo's plan to him and he witnesses a truly honorable sacrifice by Holdo, he is humbled by the realization of his own incompetence and finally starts to understand what it means to be a leader. And to wrap it all up, you see Poe finally start to see the bigger picture when Finn is like, we gotta help Luke take on Kylo, and he's like, no, wait, there's more at stake than the fight at hand. We gotta run. We gotta escape to preserve the Resistance. His whole character arc is just like so neat and so well put together. I know a lot of people have issues with Finn and Rose's story arc and the Canto Bight sequences. So do I, but I think they served a necessary purpose for the greater story. I agree with most people that it definitely fucked up the pacing. All the other stories were so active, and then it would like cut to Finn and Rose and it felt like you were just hitting the brakes. I have mixed feelings about it because by itself I like the story that it's trying to tell, but it definitely throws the whole movie off. But also, you needed to tie the whole movie together, so you can't get rid of it. Finn and Rose were definitely the least interesting characters in the movie, but that's because they weren't dealing with any inner conflict. Like, you knew who they were, you knew what they were about, you knew how they would react. And like I said in my last video, inner conflict is the greatest story, you know, the human heart in conflict with itself is the only thing worth writing about. That's like the third time I brought up my last video. Can you just like please go watch it already? But I like how the Canto Bight sequences explored choices and how regular people can make choices to get involved in something that seems maybe too big for them. And I really loved how they got into war profiteering and how that creates classism and cynicism. Like I loved when DJ was like, you know, you get them today, they'll get you tomorrow, and Finn's like, you're wrong, and he was just like, yeah, maybe. I didn't like the look of Canto Bight because I feel like it just looked like Earth with a few alien creatures here and there. Like, Star Wars settings are supposed to take you away, you know? Like, I feel like they could have made Canto Bight look more alien and we still would have gotten that it was a rich people casino world. Like, it didn't need to look like Monte Carlo. That was kind of lame. Also, I didn't like BB-8 operating that, like, mini AT-AT walker thing. Like, are there no limits to the physical and mental capabilities of this droid? Like, he's a fucking sphere. But I digress. Altogether, I felt like they just spent way too much time on the stuff with Finn and Rose. Like, I wish their combined sequences were, like, half as long. The plot and characters were predictable, so it was weird going from these, like, riveting character developments in the other storylines to this, like, video game mission where you knew exactly how the characters would react. But at the same time, it was integral in setting up the ending of the film, so I don't even know how they would restructure it or shorten it. And lastly, the emotional center of the whole film, Kylo and Rey and their battles with the past. Wow, that was so fucking well done. Their whole connection was so interesting. I loved their conversations. I thought it did a great job of adding emotion and mystery to the developing plot. I love that they were connected by the fact that they were both products of their obsession with their pasts. Him being spurned by his mentor in the Jedi Order and her longing for parental figures and a place to belong. They both longed for approval and acceptance and a role in the grand scheme of things. I loved how they show how differently both Luke and Kylo viewed that moment at the Jedi Temple. It totally made me think of Obi-Wan in Return of the Jedi when he was like, Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our point of view. That one tragic moment carried so much weight. It's crazy how the failure in that one moment set off this chain reaction that led to Kylo's descent into darkness and Luke's dissolution and abandonment and a whole bunch of other negative shit that ultimately led to the rise of the First Order and the war. I commend Rian Johnson. He fully developed Kylo Ren into the villain he was meant to be, and damn, he might be one of my favorites I've seen in a while. Adam Driver fucking brings it, man. Damn. Thank God Rian Johnson was able to see that Kylo Ren is a million times more interesting than Snoke. I'm so glad he dumped his ass. And I know people were super pissed that Snoke just got cast away after all the mystery and the speculation, but it's like, we have the raging conflict of Han and Leia's son. That is so much more interesting than trying to like retroactively make us care about some vague big bad villain. Like, J.J. Abrams didn't even set him up well, so why even waste time on him? Although I feel like Rian Johnson still had Snoke serve a good purpose in the development of Kylo Ren. Like, Snoke showed how desperate Kylo was for approval and success, but also how sick he was of fighting other people's battles. And Snoke definitely brought the tension to that climactic battle scene. It was like, no, you're bringing Rey to Snoke, you're evil. And then it was like, oh my god, just kidding, you killed him, you're good. And then it was like, oh my god, wait, never mind, you just want power, you're crazy. And like, bitch, that lightsaber battle, oh my god, that was so fucking rad. It was so well shot and so well choreographed, and not only that, it was emotionally charged. I was literally on the edge of my seat with my jaw like wide open. But I loved Kylo and Rey's connection because they're both these young inheritors of this giant convoluted war, and they're both desperately trying to let go of their past demons and establish their place in all of this. And I was with Kylo, man. I get it. Like, they should let old things die. I don't know why they're so caught up in preserving these forces that have long since proved ruinous. He's right, they should move on, but there's still that Sith in him, that arrogance that makes him go, I know how to fix it, I'll do it, join me. And then when he tries to manipulate her by being like, you're nobody in the story, but you're somebody to me, so let's start a new one, I was like, damn, now kiss. But in reality, he's the one who can't let go of his anger, of his past, of his arrogance. You see it all come to head when he just like loses it going up against Luke at the end. He's just like, still a kid, man, and Luke just throws it in his face. I was just like, damn, this motherfucker's crazy, and he's super powerful. And now he's a supreme leader. Shit is about to go off. But all these stories tie into the overreaching theme, which is that there is value in failure and that there will always be hope. And while failure is inevitable, to quote drunk puppet Yoda, the greatest teacher failure is. And the film wraps it all up so beautifully. In the wake of their failure, you have Rey asking, how do we build a resistance from this? And they show that little boy on Canto Bight using the Force and wearing his resistance ring, and it's just so moving. You're like, yes, there will always be hope as long as there's a spark. And a spark can be as small as an act of righteousness touching one oppressed kid who knows in his heart that the world he's living in is wrong and that he wants to change it. Empires are built on the backs of oppressed people, and if you show them there's hope, there will always be a chance. That's how you build a resistance. And I think Episode 9 will show them building the resistance from the ground up and starting a new Jedi Order without the dogmatic ideals that ruined the old one. And that's why I like The Last Jedi, because it really fleshed out the new characters in this new trilogy, and it also teed up the franchise to go in a new and exciting direction. And while The Last Jedi isn't your classic Star Wars film, the reality is Star Wars isn't George Lucas's baby anymore. What makes Star Wars so special is that he made those movies because he had a story that he needed to tell. But Star Wars is no longer a product of his imagination, but a product of his inspiration. And I personally can't wait for what comes next. Alright, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're here all the way at the end, I commend you, because I think this is my longest video yet, but it's fucking Star Wars, man, come on. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please check out my other ones. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please leave a comment letting me know what you guys think. I love reading and replying to all your comments, but I'm like a customer service hotline. If you come at me all crazy, call me a bitch and shit, I'm not gonna answer. But if you tell me why you disagree with me, I will answer, because I love discussing the things I love. I'm always down for a reasonable debate. Like I said in my last video, I don't have many friends I can talk about this shit with, so I look forward to your comments. So be cool, hang out, and I'll see you next time.